So here I have a sort of schematic diagram of the ear which I drew earlier. So this part here is obviously the kind of fleshy cartilaginous portion of the ear, which we call the auricle or the pinna. So that's the part that you can see. And this kind of tube-like structure here is the ear canal. That's what we're going to talk about. And just for completeness, I've kind of drawn in other sections. So these little blue bits here are cartilage. These kind of blocks here, that's just bone, that's your skull. Okay, skull, 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 bone, bone, bone. And this kind of space here, that's the middle ear, which we're not going to discuss, but I thought I would draw it in just for, you know, completeness. And this green bit here, that's the eardrum. Okay, so really we're going to focus on the ear canal at the moment. Now what I'm going to draw in the first third of the ear canal, which is cartilaginous, are little hairs. Okay, so we all know we have hairs in our ears, and it's pretty much exclusively in the first third. Now in this first third there are two glands which you need to know about, and they're really, really important. So if we kind of zoom in and let's just draw a hair follicle real quick. So there we go, basic schematic of a hair. Let's just say that that's the skin right there. Okay, so we've taken a cross section. Now we can see underneath the skin, and we can see the lower structure of the hair. What you will have is you'll have something kind of which looks like this, and you'll be familiar with this even if you don't recognize the drawing. This is called a sebaceous gland. Okay, so it produces sebum, which is Latin for fat, and you'll know what sebum feels like because if you haven't washed your hair in a while and then you run your hands through your hair like this, and you kind of feel a bit of greasiness or oiliness in your hair, that's sebum. Okay, and also as you're a teenager, your sebaceous glands tend to go a bit crazy and produce a lot of sebum, and the sebum will obviously be excreted like that, up, kind of up in that direction, like so. Okay, and the sebum is there to help kind of waterproof the skin and the hair of the ear canal and stop it from drying out and cracking and so on and so forth, getting itchy and potentially infected. And then you have another gland that kind of looks kind of coiled like a snake or a worm. And some of you, the keen-eyed among you, may recognize that as a sweat gland. Okay, so often when you see anatomical diagrams of the skin, you'll see these kind of weird coiled kind of ducts which exit through a hair follicle or up through the pores of your skin. That is a sweat gland, but it's a special type of sweat gland called a ceruminous gland. Okay, so, and they're classed as sweat glands, or technically they're classed as apocrine glands. So if you're at the gym and you're sweating a lot and you get a sweaty armpit, then that's good news because that means your apocrine glands are working effectively. So you have apocrine glands in your armpits essentially. But this is a special type of apocrine gland, or a modified type of apocrine gland. And research has shown that your ceruminous glands contain lots of antimicrobial molecules. So you'll have things like lysozyme. So lysozyme is also in your tears and your saliva. And what it will do is it's an enzyme, which is a very complicated molecule. And what it will do is actually basically cleave a hole in the outer kind of wall of a bacteria. So you also have smaller molecules in there as well, what we call peptides. So things like beta defensin 1 and 2, and a range of other things, which essentially are there to, prevent bacteria proliferating in your ear canal. So if you're constantly getting rid of all the wax that's there, then you will be getting rid of a very important natural defense that your ear has. So all that will happen. All earwax is essentially your sebaceous gland secretion, your sebum, and secretions from the ceruminous gland combining together with dead skin to make earwax. So earwax is about 50 to 60% dead skin, and then mixed with sebum and ceruminous gland secretion, and probably hair and dust and whatever else is in the mix. But these two glands are really, really important, and their function is really to protect and not to annoy. So if your ear isn't bothering you, then it makes no sense to wipe it all away. Now let's go into the second reason why you might not want to clean your ear, which I alluded to earlier, and that is that you may push the wax backwards. So let's imagine that we do have some earwax, which is in the first third. Let's do that, and let's do that. Fabulous. So that may look like a lot, but there is a nice gap through the middle, so sound can reach the eardrum. Okay, but let's say that we shove a cotton bud in, There we go, like so. And we shove it in and out and twirl it around and whatever else. Now, if you look at the clumps of wax that I've drawn, they're fairly large. They're not going to magically the huge chunk isn't going to magically stick on to the cotton bud and the cotton bud will drag it out. That's just not going to happen. What's going to happen is the cotton bud will kind of smush against the wax, and you may kind of push it back like that. And you might push it back like that. Okay? So undoubtedly, of course, the surface of those clumps of wax will undoubtedly smear the end of the cotton bud, but the cotton bud doesn't have any kind of magical suction power. All it's going to do is grab some of it, but the rest is going to be pushed backwards, and it's going to be compressed, compacted, like so. But also you've pushed that wax far away from those lovely sebaceous and ceremonous glands. So it's now, it's not going to be softened, it's not going to be lovely and gungy and whatever else. It's going to become hard, encrusted and impacted and stuck in there. And what will happen is, as time goes by and more cotton buds are used, more will get pushed back, more will get pushed back, and eventually, more will get pushed here, and then the minute somebody has a shower, water will go in and sit there and clog the system, and eventually you have an earwax blockage. And the problem is that often when this kind of thing happens, people usually don't associate the blockage with the original cotton bud usage, because at that particular time, it may have been weeks or months ago when they originally pushed that wax back, they still felt fine. But it's only weeks or months later that the real problem occurs, and it's all just due to the fact that it was pushed back, and the wax is then without all those natural softening secretions. So that's reason number 2. Reason number 3 is very, very interesting. So this green skin here, as I mentioned before, is the eardrum. Now what happens is, if we take that as the rough center of the eardrum, what will happen is that the skin will migrate out. This is a natural kind of growth pattern. So it will actually grow outward from the eardrum and down the ear canal outwards. So this is the ear's natural self-cleaning mechanism, okay? The reason for the migration is not entirely clear. So some researchers think that it's to do with how the ear canal is formed when you're an embryo, and it's to do with the kind of mitosis, so cell division of the skin. Some people think that it's to do with jaw movement and how your jaw movements affect, make the cartilaginous portion of your ear canal move. I mean, it's not totally clear, basically. But what we do know is that when it gets to kind of here, the osseo-cartilage junction right there, what's supposed to happen is that the skin will desquamate. So squam is just Latin for kind of scale, and desquamate is basically descale. So the skin sheds, essentially. And then, of course, conveniently, it's shedding right in the place where all these lovely glands are, okay? But what do you think will happen if we get good old Mr. Cotton Bud back in the picture, okay? And we jab it in and twirl it around and so on, and we apply, inward force there and inward force there. What do you think is going to happen to the skin as it's migrating out? Well, what you might do is you might create a little ridge, so the skin is kind of being pushed backwards, okay, and it's been pushed backwards. There, you're creating little ridges of, dead skin and wax and so on. What do you think is going to happen to this skin as it's migrating? Well, it's going to migrate, migrate, migrate. Do you think it's going to travel around like that, around the obstruction? Unfortunately not. What's going to happen is it will probably reach here and go, we have a problem, and it'll probably just desquamate there, and the same will happen here. It will desquamate there. So what you have is now a failure of that epithelial migration. It's desquamating too early and it's getting trapped. So it'll probably desquamate, and a little bit of dead skin there, a little bit of dead skin there, and you can see the pattern that's forming. So eventually you'll have, eventually it'll clog and clog and clog and clog, and eventually you might, again, water might be involved, and eventually you will have a very serious build-up of dead skin. And this is obviously a very exaggerated example, but things like this can occur. And this would more be a case where you have a plug of dead skin, very dense dead skin. That would be called keratosis obturans. which is a very nasty condition. If you want to see me extract a case of keratosis obturans, then I'll link you down in the description below. But essentially, you know, this conveyor is meant to move debris and dead skin down the ear canal and out, essentially. And you know, any attempt to kind of manually clean the ear canal will probably result in a failure of that system. So there we go. That's the epithelial migration, or the epithelial conveyor. Same thing. Okay everyone, so I hope you found that video really interesting. Those are the 3 reasons why you shouldn't clean your ears. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section below and I will try my very best to get back to you. Once again, thank you very much for liking, subscribing and watching the video, and I will see you on the next one.